Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 here on Broadcasting Scotland. My name's Kenny McBride and joining me tonight is Chris McCusker from the Socialist Group of the SNP. And once again, Chris, it's like Groundhog Day in here. We're back talking about what nightmare scenario Boris Johnson is proposing for Brexit next. So today he made his speech to the Conservative Party conference in Manchester. And actually didn't speak about the EU a very great deal, spoke more about domestic issues, clearly kind of indicating that he's looking at an election fairly soon. But on Europe, he did announce that he has plans that he's putting forward to the EU. He said that no deal is not an outcome we want, is not an outcome we seek at all. But let me tell you, my friends, it is an outcome for which we are ready. He said, we will under no circumstances have checks at or near the border in Northern Ireland. We will respect the peace process and the Good Friday Agreement, which sounds like a very good start. He then said, and by a process of renewable democratic consent by the Executive and Assembly of Northern Ireland, we will go further and protect the existing regulatory arrangements for farmers and other businesses on both sides of the border, which sounds very much like putting a Stormont veto on any changes that might come about, although obviously Stormont isn't even sitting just now, so it's hard to know what difference that would make. He did, though, confirm that he would insist on Northern Ireland leaving the customs union immediately, along with the rest of the UK, which would obviously necessitate some customs checks. And he said that the proposal represented a significant compromise from the British government, and he urged the EU 27 to respond in kind. He said there, I hope very much that our friends understand that and compromise in their turn, because if we fail to get an agreement because of what is essentially a technical discussion of the exact nature of future customs checks, when that technology is improving the whole time, then let us be in no doubt that the alternative is no deal. So, obviously, the problem there is that the EU has asked for specific suggestions. The point of the backstop is, if nothing else happens, then this is what will happen. And the EU has consistently said, if you don't want the backstop in place, there has to be something else to prevent it ever being needed. And it seems that Boris Johnson has pretty much just hopes and wishes as
that won't happen
as his other alternative. So what do we make of this? Is this just Boris Johnson saying we don't want a deal, tell us to sling our hooks?
Basically, he's offering the EU an alternative that they will refuse, so that he can take his no deal and carry on regardless. The ramifications for that then being is that he must be ready to unlawfully deny Parliament with regards to the Benn Act, and he is single-minded. I have to say, you have to admire his roguishness, his his bloody mindedness that, come hell or high water, we're coming out, deal or no deal. And it is, make no doubt about it, regardless of the platitudes that he put out today for the conference, with regards to New Deal, the New Deal won't float, and is definitely a no deal that we're staring at the 31st of October.
Yeah, it does very much seem like that, and it seems like people in the EU are kind of seeing it the same way. One EU official said, if this is the final offer, then there is not a deal to be had. Ireland's European Affairs Minister Helen McEntee said the plans would not be acceptable to Dublin and raised doubts that Johnson was sincere in even wanting a deal. She said, what we're talking about again is picking and choosing certain parts of the single market that would be aligned in Northern Ireland. It's talking about a time limit, which again is not acceptable. Then Lisa Chambers, Brexit spokesperson for Fianna Fáil, described the plan as unacceptable and unworkable. She tweeted earlier today The UK is reneging on commitments made to citizens on the island of Ireland that there would be no hard border. This would set our country back years. You would have to question if Prime Minister Johnson is genuinely serious about getting a deal. This suggests not. We need to see something that's credible, and if this is what is being proposed, it certainly won't be acceptable, not only to the Irish government, but to the EU as a whole. The Labour peer, Lord Hayne, Peter Hayne, the former Northern Ireland Secretary, said it would breach Britain's own Withdrawal Act 2018, which included the clause specifically banning border arrangements between the North and the South of Ireland after Exit Day, including physical infrastructure, including border posts, checks and controls that did not exist before Exit Day. He said it would sabotage the Good Friday Agreement, but at the same time, we've got Dominic Cummings telling top advisors in Whitehall, to be clear, we won't be hanging around waiting for them to negotiate with us. If they reject our offer, that's it. Meanwhile, Philippe Lambert, a member of the European Parliament's Brexit steering group, said, we are in a worse situation than we were facing Theresa May, because at least Theresa May had a working majority. The last thing the EU wants to do is to make concessions that won't fly in Westminster. My interpretation of Boris Johnson's actions since being Prime Minister is to take the United Kingdom out of the European Union without a deal, but with the opportunity to shift the blame to someone else. And this, again, I may have mentioned this on the show before, but I remember probably about 2 years ago, somebody saying that this was Theresa May's strategy, that the idea was that she would set red lines that were so impossible that eventually she would get to a point where the EU would say, there's nothing more we can do, and she would be able to say, throw her hands in the air and say, well, we tried and tried and tried, and the EU doesn't want to compromise, so we have to leave with no deal.
Yeah.
It seems like that wasn't her strategy in the end, because she never got to the point where she actually threw up her hands and walked away. It does definitely seem to be what Boris Johnson's doing.
Yeah, because Boris Johnson's obviously got a shorter span of time in order to deliver something. And that something has to be something of, real credibility in order for it to get through Parliament. However, what he is suggesting, the proposals he's put out today, are nowhere near anything credible that the Labour Party or the SNP would possibly consider. Unfortunately, it was slipped. I actually tweeted to Broadcasting Scotland earlier on that the deputy Lib Dem leader Jamie Stone had actually confirmed that if it was a stark choice between Corbyn and no deal, he would prefer no deal.
Yeah, he said he would choose no deal every time over any government that involved Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah, so that shows you how far that the Lib Dems are thinking about what is best for the country, because what they're really thinking about is what's best for the Lib Dems, which is perfectly understandable. Every party always thinks of themselves first. That's entirely up to them. But what they have to understand is that you can't have your cake and eat it. And Boris Johnson, similarly, will find out after the 19th that he, will not be able to have his cake and eat it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that comment from Jamie Stone. He's the Lib Dems Scottish spokesperson, the equivalent of a shadow Scottish secretary. We've heard Jo Swinson say similar things in recent times, that she wouldn't do anything that would put Jeremy Corbyn into number 10. And yet, it's the Lib Dems who say they will move heaven and earth to prevent Brexit. And we've heard every party, I think, say they're putting country before party. They're willing to do whatever it takes to achieve, whether they're Leavers or Remainers. Yeah. We've heard all the parties do that. And quite honestly, the only party I think that can honestly say they've put Britain first in all of this is the SNP.
Yeah, you only have to look at today's announcement 3 years ago, the SNP put to Theresa May an alternative arrangement to Brexit with regards Scotland's own individual needs and requirements, which obviously encompassed staying in the single market and staying in the customs union and having access to freedom of movement. Right now, it seems that we all know, it's well documented that they never even read the envelope. You know, whether or not they actually opened the letter in the first place. And now it seems that although they're not replicating the exact deal to Northern Ireland, it seems that Northern Ireland can have its own individual deal that suits Britain, that suits the EU, but it doesn't suit anyone else. It certainly won't suit the Republic of Ireland. You know, it won't benefit Scotland in any such way. We'll still be, for the want of a better word, a vassal state within a vassal state, because you know, although Northern Ireland will have access through the agri-food sector, you know, and various other amended items, in order for them to, if this goes through, we're still all talking hypotheticals here, but basically they would have a better arrangement than what Scotland would have, and yet we are supposed to be in a union of equals.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is just a whole case of trying to square a circle. The whole Brexit process has been that, and the contradictions involved in it of, you know, as we've continually pointed out, that we were supposedly voting to bring power back to Parliament, and yet successive governments have gone to court on multiple occasions to try and prevent Parliament having a say. It's the hypocrisy is fairly overwhelming. And on that note,
definitely is. And just before you carry on there, what we have to also remember is the fact that there is several court proceedings running in the background at this moment in time. And you know, so we are not out of the woods yet with regards to the judicial system.
On that note, we have just heard, this is breaking news, that Boris Johnson will ask the Queen to prorogue Parliament for around a week, starting from next Tuesday. Obviously, last week the Supreme Court ruled that the previous prorogation was unlawful, but this one, because there does need to be a prorogation before Queen's speech, this one is expected to be one that will go through. Question obviously is whether a Queen's speech is necessary at this stage, whether we actually need to be starting a new legislative session right before Brexit.
Well, it sets a platform now for the SNP, to be honest with you, because as I said, this will be the second time that Parliament's been prorogued in a month, although this time it's going to be, you know, fairly legal. However, it is rather lengthy because you only really need 2 or 3 days. Why Boris Johnson wants it done for nearly a week is anybody's guess. But the main thing about this is that once his manifesto for government has been set out through the Queen's speech, that is if the Queen will actually support it. You know, I'm no lover of the Queen, but she has indicated, I did see a couple of days ago, that she would be prepared to throw Boris Johnson out of office if he steps out of line again. So, you know, bear in mind he gets this through and all the rest of it. That to me then gives the SNP a clear platform to say, right, okay, we're heading for no deal at the 31st of October. He's already delivered a Queen's speech. There's nothing else really that the SNP can do apart from fight this election on an independence ticket, and you know, we have to take it from there. However, we have to point out again, and the viewers might get really, really bored of this. Even if we deliver 58 or 59 MPs out of 59, the Tories will still not agree to the colour of you-know-what if we demand X, Y and Z. So, we are stuck in this perpetual vortex for the foreseeable future.
I mean, there is a problem with a Queen's speech, of course. A Queen's speech requires a vote.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no guarantee at the moment that Boris Johnson could get a Queen's speech passed.
Mm-hmm.
In which case, it would effectively be a vote of no confidence. If you can't get a Queen's speech passed, then that would effectively be a vote of no confidence. And we would have to, I think, under the Fixed Term Parliament Act, I think we would then go into the 2-week process of trying to find another, which would take us very close to Brexit.
It would take us very close. But again, we have to point out that, as early as now, the Lib Dems have already set out their stall by saying that they will not support Jeremy Corbyn in anything. So, it has to be taken into consideration that, before the people jumped ship to the Lib Dems, we wouldn't have really been bringing their position up, because they only had, 4 or 6. Now they've got 18. It's a wee bit, again, falls down to, are the numbers there in order to support voting down the Queen's speech, and therefore going for a no confidence vote.
Yeah.
You have to also remember as well that you're up against the independents, although we will probably have Plaid and the Greens with us. The Tories will have the DUP, and it just depends on will the Tory rebels have the courage of their convictions?
I mean, it's very hard to see how this could be done without potentially some of the suspended Tories and the Lib Dems joining with them now. But it's hard to see how the Lib Dems could justify supporting a Boris Johnson Queen's speech, given that they in theory oppose everything that he's trying to do.
Yeah, but the Lib Dems in theory are champions of the union. So when it comes to the yin yang of politics, they would drop their red lines in order for the bigger goal to be part of government. And if that means obviously teaming up with the Tories in order to champion the union, they will definitely do that first.
Yeah.
So it actually highlights the fact that their stance on Brexit is a pile of pants.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be a real challenge for them. I mean, their big selling point in England now is we're the anti-Brexit party. We're the good guys who want to stop Brexit.
Yeah, but completely. It's just been proven today that they're not the anti-Brexit
party.
But
they're not. It doesn't seem that they're willing to actually do what it takes to prevent that. So, I mean, the other question is, do you suppose, if it comes to the crunch, that they would say, well, there isn't a choice now, we have to stop the Tories?
I honestly don't think so, because I think the union is the greater sum of the value of Brexit, and this was the core theme in Boris Johnson's speech today. It was all about championing the union. It was all about unifying this great country and all the rest of it. He went to pains to talk about shipbuilding and governance, stuff like that. He pointed out the space programme up in the Highlands, and then he started talking to the man with no face, or was it the man with no name? What's his name? Alistair Jack. He started talking to him about fish, and do you know what I mean? So it was about trying to encompass all, bring everybody in, circle the wagons, and and in that rallying call, if you are first and foremost a diehard unionist, as opposed to being, sold on the European project, then obviously you need to protect the union, because again, Boris made the point that there are people who want to break up the union. No surprises there, folks.
Yeah.
But so the Lib Dems don't want to break up the union. Obviously, the Tories don't want to break up the union. The DUP don't want to do it. Labour are kind of wishy-washy on it. It might happen under Jeremy Corbyn. Certainly wouldn't happen under Richard Leonard. But we'll just need to see what happens in 2021. Yeah. So 3/2 or 4/2. They're always going to champion the union long before they extol the virtues of being European and internationalists.
And just to give a wee bit of the Scottish Government's perspective here, Mike Russell responded to the Brexit, these new proposals, saying it looks like these proposals are designed to fail and that the UK government is intent on pursuing a no deal. This plan does not appear to be a serious basis for negotiation. The UK government is pulling back from previous undertakings and demanding the EU makes concessions on its fundamental principles, which it will not accept. The number one priority now is to find a way to stop the disastrous no deal outcome which the UK government has demonstrated it favours. The proposals published today also show that in the longer term, the UK government wants a much more distant relationship with the EU, with all the damage to jobs and living standards that will bring. And meanwhile, the Communities Secretary Aileen Campbell wrote to the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Therese Coffey, saying basically that a no-deal Brexit was a disastrous option. Tens of thousands of people in Scotland are at risk of being pushed into poverty. And if the UK government sanctions this highly damaging course of action, it must deal with the consequences. And a lot of that was around specific things that could be done, particularly with the social security system, universal credit, pension credit, these kind of things, which are not under any obvious direct risk, but obviously if people start losing jobs, then it becomes a much bigger contingent of people that need to deal with those problems. So what do you make of the Scottish Government's position here? What should the Scottish Government be doing right now, do you think?
Well, as you pointed out earlier on, the Scottish Government have been consistent from the start, and they are not going to change their position anytime soon. And it's laudable to think that the Scottish Government will do all it can in order to mitigate any negative impacts to our country. But there is a point where there's only so much mitigation that you can do. And it has been well set out. Ian Blackford has set it out constantly that Scotland will lose jobs. It will lose investment. You only need to look at the amount of money that comes from the EU for infrastructure projects. That will all cease, and I go back to what I was saying earlier on. We will then become a vassal state within a vassal state.
Well, as ever, we will keep an eye on it. I mean, it's a story that never stops changing. As I say, we got some breaking news coming into the studio there, so we will I'm sure be talking about it again for at least the next month, and if not the next goodness knows how long. In the meantime, we will move on to some world news, and this one quite disturbing story. North Korea fires a ballistic missile thought to be from a submarine just days before it's due to resume talks with the United States on ending its nuclear program. This report from Reuters, if confirmed, it would be the most provocative test by North Korea since it started the talks with the US in 2018. Analysts said it was likely a reminder by Pyongyang of the weapons capability it's been aggressively developing as it gears up for a new round of talks. South Korea's military said it had detected the launch of one missile that flew 450 kilometres, that's about 280 miles, and reached an altitude of 910 kilometres, which is 565 miles. It was likely a Pukguk-song class weapon, which means the pole star in Korean. That was the name of their earlier range of submarine-launched ballistic missiles. So CNN reported, based on a report based on a US official, that the missile had been launched from an underwater platform, which North Korea had previously done at an earlier stage of this submarine program in 2015. So this North Korean issue, this is perhaps the one thing that Donald Trump has done that has drawn him some plaudits from various parts of the world. Obviously, bringing North Korea in from the cold is a goal of China, the US, Japan, South Korea. Everybody wants North Korea to just be a normal country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And yet, every step that's been taken, and this, Trump may not have been the most opportune leader to try and make these talks, but it does seem that every time the US takes a step forward, North Korea does something to try and prevent progress being made. Almost. Yeah. What do you think this says about the state of the negotiations, and what do you think it says about North Korea more generally?
Well, I mean, I've always viewed North Korea as being a country that basically wants to get left alone. It's a bit like a hedgehog. Do you know what I mean? Unless you irritate it, it won't, put its haunches up and put out its spikes. They want to be able to do their own thing, whilst flexing their muscles and saying, look, whilst we're doing our own thing, don't come and bother our door because, we've got this on we can launch it at any time. The capability we've got, so just go away, right, and let us, pursue our own angles. Right now, it's never thought I'd say that it'd be laudable for anybody, including somebody like Trump, in order to try and further negotiations to bring them sort of like not alongside the Western world, but to sort of like at least be able to talk to them on bilateral platforms and be able to have a civilised conversation. However, as you quite rightly point out, the very second that you try and do a civilised conversation, they go and do something completely banal and anarchic that leaves everybody's heads just scratching as to why are you doing this?
Yeah, I mean I've heard one analyst talking about North Korea, and he said that the important thing to remember is that there's always at least two different things going on. Anytime North Korea does anything, there's always what the internal audience is supposed to get out of it and what the external audience is supposed to get out of it. And the suggestion that this guy was making was that whenever they launch a weapon, they're trying to remind the internal audience how strong North Korea is. It's very little. It's got very little to do with what's happening outside. They're not actually trying to threaten Japan or South Korea because the last thing they actually want is a war. So it's interesting. It does suggest to me maybe that it's partly just to kind of say we're still really important and you still have to take us seriously when you come for these talks. I mean, we have to just hope and pray, I think, that it's not an act of aggression. The
only one, obviously, the only one concern that I have is that, can we trust Trump not to misjudge their signals? And I mean signals, I mean, by their actions and their words.
Yeah, for him not to take it as an act of aggression and decide to bomb
because he would he would act first, obviously, because he wants to be able to stand on the number one podium and say, well, I've done this because of that. Down in later years, as we found out with Iraq when Tony Blair took that stance, he didn't really have to take that stance in the first place. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, Donald Trump certainly right now could use some sort of positive publicity. The impeachment inquiry continues, and yesterday the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo dismissed summonses from Democratic committee chairmen in the House of Representatives for 5 current and former State Department officials to testify on the president's attempts to push Ukraine to dig up dirt on Joe Biden. Pompeo wrote to the House Foreign Affairs Committee accusing Democrats of an attempt to intimidate, bully and treat improperly those officials. The requested dates were not feasible, he said. The speed of the investigation raises significant legal and procedural concerns, he wrote. And I will not tolerate such tactics, and I will use all means at my disposal to prevent and expose any attempts to intimidate the dedicated professionals. However, it soon became clear that Pompeo had only limited power to stop the congressional committees from gathering evidence for the impeachment inquiry. One of the 5 witnesses deposed, Kurt Volker, the former special envoy for Ukraine who resigned last week, confirmed that he would speak to the committees in closed session on Thursday, according to Associated Press. A second witness, Marie Yovanovitch, the former ambassador to Kiev, would appear on the 11th of October. And perhaps most damaging of all, the State Department's Inspector General, Steve Linick, who acts as a watchdog, informed the House committees that he wanted to brief them on Wednesday on documents concerning relations with Ukraine that had been obtained from the department's legal advisor. It's not clear that Pompeo was involved in that he knew about that. But what we do know now is that Mike Pompeo was actually on the call with the Ukrainian president, where Trump allegedly said that he was withholding this aid money until such times as they investigated Joe Biden, which he flatly denied a matter of days ago.
Yeah. Also worth noting as well, it's not just Joe Biden that they're looking into as well. They're trying to dig up dirt on Joe Biden's son as well, because both of them have got business interests in Ukraine.
Yeah.
It'll make a great movie. Do you know what I mean? I can pretty much just see Spielberg writing it just now. And it has got all the hallmarks of a real White House scandal. However, I think that Trump is clever enough to bury anything that could possibly incriminate him until such times as he's finished with office. And then he'll take his chances, obviously. The thing, I don't really understand the full inner workings of the American politics, because you've got 2 sort of like houses. One's run by the Democrats, one's run by the Republicans. So I heard that the first court action is going to be heard in the House of Representatives, which is the Democrats.
Yeah, they present articles of impeachment to the Senate.
But then, so in round 2, it would then go to the inner House, which is the Senate, and that's, all of Trump's pals.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So, there's an awful lot of hedges and furlongs to jump over, as this anarchic derby runs on. Meanwhile, you've got Nancy Pelosi working in the background, running about, trying to get wee bits of information here, there and everywhere in order to, to try and bolster the case for impeachment. But if, I mean, I just seem to view Trump as being completely Teflon.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's just cynical of me, but
the Teflon Don is one of his nicknames. I mean, do we think this is going to damage him at all then?
I not while he's in office. I don't think it's got any direct ramifications for him at this moment in time. Further down the line, yes, it may be, but again, we have to remember that Donald Trump is one of the most powerful businessmen in the world. Basically, he can do anything from Trump Tower. Do you know what I mean? And he will be able to. he's got money at his disposal where he could hire the brilliant minds of the law system of America and be able to squirm his way out of, any kind of hole. It has to be, watertight. Mm-hmm. If I can use the word water, because I was just about to point out that the last time that the American judicial system went for impeachment with regards to Nixon, it didn't actually come out as an impeachment because
he ended up
Nixon,
resigning before.
Managed to do.
And certainly, Trump's not got the shame to resign.
Of course not.
Before he gets impeached. It is an interesting situation. There of course have been many Democrats for quite some time saying that it was a bad idea to impeach. It was Nancy Pelosi's line for quite a long time that it was just too much of a political risk because they knew they wouldn't win and they suspected it might just embolden or rally Trump's base. So now even though they have this hard evidence, it does seem like Trump's supporters just aren't interested in anything that he may have done wrong. They're more interested now in what Joe Biden may have done wrong, which, to be fair, we should probably look into as well.
Well, because at the end of the day, as I pointed out on Sunday to you, both of them are capitalists, and when two capitalists fight, there is only going to be one outcome: more capitalism.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because the other will take the asset of the other, and preside over, the current trajectory in which the country is going at this moment in time, and it's replicated within Britain at the moment. There was a stark thing that I wanted to point out earlier on with regards Boris, because I said on Sunday that Boris is learning off of Trump. He's going to Trump's school of politics and stuff like that, but Boris today was extolling the great values of the NHS, and that it's definitely not up for sale, which is pretty much on Trump's main agenda at this moment in time. And he came out and basically self-confessed that he is a capitalist. He's like, when was the last time a Conservative said that that they are openly capitalist, right? So this was obviously nothing new for me. But then when I was actually thinking about his speech and he was talking about the benefits of the NHS, how everybody has to pay, and all the rest of it. Sorry, that's one. Everybody benefits. Sorry, that's two. And the whole country will rally around to be at your bedside when you're sick. Right. Sorry, that's a bit like socialism, is it not?
Yeah, it kind of is. Just by the way, while we're on American politics, and speaking of socialists as well, we would just like to send our very best wishes to Bernie Sanders if he's watching. He was taken into hospital today. He had some chest pain at a rally last night. He's had 2 stents put in. We believe he's recovering well, but as we say, Bernie, if you are watching, then we do hope you get well soon. Now, moving on to Hong Kong, where the person who was shot in the protests the other night has been named as Tony Tsang, 18 years old, known to his friends as the school vice captain, organised events for fellow students, and had been involved in several of the protests. He appears to have been shot in the chest at point-blank range after fighting with an officer in the Tsuen Wan district. He's now in hospital. He is stable. The bullet apparently just missed his heart, but he's in generally good health, and they do believe he's got a good chance of recovery now. His friends were very angry. There were several. They held a press conference, several of them still wearing masks because they don't want to be identified by the police. But they all said that he was the kind of guy who would always stand up for what he believed in. If he saw somebody being bullied, he would step in. And in the case of these pro-democracy protests, he said it gave him the anti-extradition movement that started this year gave him renewed purpose. He often said he would rather die than be arrested. And unfortunately, it almost came to that. The police officer, there's video evidence of him running into the crowd with his weapon drawn, which suggests that his claim that he was only firing in self-defense is perhaps not entirely accurate, but that is now the line that the Hong Kong government is putting out, the Hong Kong police is putting out. They seem to be standing quite firm on the idea that this was self-defense to shoot an 18-year-old boy in the chest at point-blank range. So what do we make of the situation in Hong Kong? I mean, this is the first time a weapon has been fired at someone. There have been warning shots fired at other protests.
Yeah, honestly, it really makes me sad because it's obviously a suppression of people being able to show their democratic right to protest, this is the wider picture for me is that this is China basically starting the rollback of Hong Kong governance. It's supposed to be 20 odd years now, 25 years before Hong Kong succeeds back into China, and it seems that they are ramping it up more and more and more, to extol the communist stance that China adopts. Totally unrelated, although people will be aware that I'm wearing my Palestine badge tonight, is that in China at this moment in time there are thousands and thousands of Chinese Muslims being incarcerated in prisons, and who are being treated to some of the most horrendous, heinous acts of waterboarding, shock treatment, and the schooling to take them out of their religion, and make them
feel
atheists.
More Chinese.
Make them feel more Chinese. Atheism is the
official state religion.
The official state religion. So and this is again is really frightening. Because you only have to look at what happened in the Baltic states and stuff like that to see that this is a start of a genocide of a race of people who through their own choice. Everybody has got the freedom of choice of religion. In Scotland you're brought up one way or the other, whether you're Church of Scotland Protestant or whether you're Catholic and you're maybe Jewish, whatnot, what have you. But when you get to any level-headed parent, thankfully my parents were very level-headed. When you get to a certain age, they turn it on you and they say it's up to you now if you want to follow. I personally have got many issues against the Catholic Church that we could go into in another programme. But to extol someone's virtues and values and then to deny them quite simply just because you want everybody to be the exact same as you. Because they believe that if everyone is the same, there will be complete harmony. And that, I'm sorry, that just doesn't work. And this is what they're doing to the people in Hong Kong as well. They are pressing their will on them, not to have a voice, not to be disobedient,
to just be ordinary Chinese
people,
like everyone else. I mean, you're right. We probably don't talk enough as a society generally about the level of human rights abuses by China. It is a really monstrous dictatorship in so many ways, and we just don't keep a very close eye on it. Hong Kong, obviously, we've had a historic interest in, so it does grab our attention a bit more. And to some of us have friends in Hong Kong. We just hope the ordinary people there are doing okay, because anytime the Chinese government decides to crack down, as you know, it can be incredibly brutal. Anyway, we come back home now. We've got a few fairly good news stories. This first one, not as good. This is on the Argyll and Bute growth deal. Michael Matheson today said that the UK government is simply re-announcing money that has already been committed. Yeah. The Scottish government has made clear their commitment to invest in the Argyll and Bute growth deal, and we've been ready to do so for some considerable time. On the basis of our 50-50 approach to funding growth deals, we will of course match the £25 million announced by the UK government, adding to the £1.8 billion we've committed to the growth deals across Scotland. We will help our Argyll and Bute partners develop and refine the projects they think will have the transformative effect on the local economy that we all want to see. Not shocking that the British government is not telling the entire truth about money that it's releasing.
What are you suggesting, Kenny?
I'm not suggesting anything. I'm saying flat out that the UK government makes a habit of re-announcing money when it wants to give to Scotland. Meanwhile, the Ferguson Marine Yards, which we've discussed several times on the show, the Scottish government has begun legal discussions with administrators to conclude the process of taking Ferguson Marine into public ownership. I'm sure you'll be delighted to hear this.
Yes.
So this was following a sale of business process. Administrators have concluded that 3 indicative offers for the business received from commercial parties are either not able to be executed or do not represent a better outcome for the creditors than selling the business to the Scottish government. Mm-hmm. So administrators are now in discussion with Scottish ministers to agree the final terms and expect that to be completed within the next 4 weeks. So the employees were notified of that position today, and Derek Mackay, the Economy Secretary, said, "We've always been clear that we want to complete the vessels, secure the jobs and give the yard a future. Administrators have concluded that despite other bids being submitted for the yard, the Scottish Government's offer presents the best outcome for creditors. We are working with the administrators to bring the yard into public ownership. I will be there on Monday to meet with the excellent workforce and reiterate the Scottish Government's commitment to achieving the best possible outcome for the yard and its employees. While there is still more to be done, our actions have ensured that there will be a future for Ferguson's." And as a proud socialist, I'm sure you're delighted to hear that a major engineering firm like that is coming into public ownership.
It's fantastic, and not only this as well. I was watching Holyrood today, and they were discussing the rolling back of the Abellio contract, and the ridiculous position that Labour want to end it right now. You know, with no feasibility study done, it'll cost X, Y, and Z, you know, in order to put it back into public ownership, which again, obviously, I would desperately want to see that being put into public ownership as well as the buses. But again, without doing the necessary homework, Labour come out with these ludicrous bills and amendments, with no thought whatsoever, and you just wonder, what are Labour all about? But to get back onto the shipyards, it's a fantastic deal. It reinforces the fact that when it all kicked off, the Scottish Government's initial promise was that the 2 ferries that are currently being working on at the moment in time will be put to sea in obviously a fashion of readiness, and the yard at that time will be looking, they're looking now for contracts that they can start once those 2 boats have cleared the yard. Mm-hmm. there was the announcement of the frigates. Again, I spoke about that earlier on. Boris Johnson touched on it, although they're going to get done in Rosyth. Primarily, Ferguson's will have a certain amount of input into that, I would imagine, and I would hope as well. But then it really rests on what is on the pipeline from the UK defence budget, that they will, we will see if Boris lives up to, everything that he was saying in his speech, extolling the virtues of having a wonderful shipbuilding legacy, which is paying fantastic hourly wages, and these wages are going to go up within 5 years, to £10.50. Great, Boris, well done, brilliant. So it's great, and it's something that activists need to be aware of when they're champing on the doors, and they're pointing out to people, look, it's not the Westminster government that have saved the shipyards, it's the Scottish government that have done it, and here's the hard evidence of it. It's a great news story.
Yeah, we did get a comment from Stuart McMillan, who's the MP for the MSP for Greenock and Inverclyde. He's been a guest on the show. Said this is fantastic news for the local area, the workforce and the communities that will benefit from these 2 new ferries. The past year, but particularly the last few months, have been fraught with uncertainty for the workforce, and there were concerns over whether or not these ferries would be completed. However, in August, the Scottish Government took the decisive step to secure the future of the yard, which stakeholders locally and nationally welcomed. Today's announcement that the Scottish Government will complete the purchase is hugely positive and highlights the SNP's commitment to shipbuilding on the Clyde. It also poses a huge opportunity to seek further investment in the local area and for more vessels to be built at the yard. No one wanted this situation to develop as it has, but thanks to our Finance Secretary, these ferries will be built, jobs have been saved, and shipbuilding has a future in Port Glasgow. So again, it is good news that any time jobs are saved, any time shipbuilding is strengthened in Scotland, that's a good thing. So again, congratulations to everyone involved in that, and all the best to the workers as well. They're the really important part of this.
Good.
Moving on again, a new national task force is to start work on maintaining Scotland's world-leading reputation for human rights. This task force will put human rights at the heart of legislation. The National Task Force for Human Rights Leadership will consider the recommendations of the First Minister's Advisory Group on Human Rights Leadership. A new statutory framework will also be developed by the task force to improve human rights protections for everyone in Scotland and look at finding ways to increase public participation in the process. The task force is made up of members from the public sector and civil society. It's co-chaired by the Social Security Secretary Shirley-Anne Somerville and Professor Alan Miller, who's the former chair of the Scottish Human Rights Commission and chair of the First Minister's Advisory Group on Human Rights Leadership. And Shirley-Anne Somerville said, Scotland is a world leader in human rights, and I would like to welcome and thank the members of the task force for volunteering to help keep us in that position. Respecting, protecting and fulfilling human rights is an international obligation at the heart of everything we do. Our commitment to fundamental principles of human dignity and equality will now be turned into statutory action that serves every member of our society. So what do you make of that announcement then?
It's a welcome announcement. Again, I think we have always said that there is more to do, and I think whilst we are talking about human rights, I have to bring up the issue of Glasgow's homelessness. Shelter Scotland are actually considering court action against Glasgow Council, because they have failed to address the system, and obviously it's a situation where Glasgow City Council are trying their level best. I know this to be true. Obviously, I'm in close contact with my comrade Graham Campbell, Councillor Graham Campbell, and he gives me updates on you know what the council are all about. Again, obviously it's the effects of 10 years of
austerity,
sanctions imposed upon Scotland against our will, the Scotland's inability to mitigate the worst of the bedroom tax, the rape clause, the various decisions by Atos in order to cut people's money and stuff like that because they didn't turn up in time for the bloody job to start with, and the Glasgow Council have tried their level best, and obviously Shelter Scotland have came to a point where they've said, enough's enough, we need to do something else. Because it is a human right that everybody has the right to have a house. Now, I feel passionate about this because I myself was homeless for 9 months. And I know what it's like not to have a roof over your head. And honestly, I'm trying not to get emotional now, but it really is. It makes me sick to the stomach that in this modern day society, where we've got Boris Johnson talking about gigabit this and 4G that, and we're going to ramp up the wages for the working people and get them into work and all the rest of it. And there's people lying on the streets. There are people from your armed forces lying on the streets because they have got nowhere to go because of your policies. I'm sorry, Kenny. As welcome as this is, it needs, homelessness needs to be up there.
Well, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. Unfortunately, we've only got a couple of minutes left, and getting into homelessness now would probably take us well over time. So just finally, another wee bit of good news from the Scottish Government. More than 46,000 children across Scotland are already benefiting from extra hours of high quality early learning and childcare, almost a year before the full rollout of 1,140 funded hours of care for every eligible child. New figures show that 1/3 of 3 and 4-year-olds and eligible 2-year-olds are already accessing more than the minimum 600 hours to which they're currently entitled. So I know you don't have young Waynes yourself, do you?
Well, no, I don't actually know, but in my constituency, I know that the Eastwood or East Renfrewshire Council are actually building a new several new nurseries. They are extending on one where I used to live, and where I live now they're building a brand new one. They've demolished an old playing fields building, and they're building a purpose-built nursery within the confines of a sort of like green space. And I think it just shows again that the Scottish Government are putting investment into early years, and obviously it gives those children a good footing for getting into primary, and obviously it sets them on the path to secondary. And it always makes me laugh when the Tories say that, and the Lib Dems as well, when they say that the Scottish education system is absolutely rank. Do you know what I mean? And yet you can see projects like this.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? And you think, well, you've really got no credibility whatsoever.
Well, that seems to be a fairly running theme on this show when you're in, Chris. Thank you very much for coming in. We are running out of time now. So just before we go, I will remind you, as always, making TV programmes is an expensive business. In order to keep the lights on here, we do need more and more of you to sign up as Broadcasting Scotland supporters, which you can do at the address you can see on your screen there. Become a Broadcasting Scotland supporter at broadcastingscotland.scot/register. Your £5 a month makes a huge difference to the kind of programmes, the number of programmes that we can put on. There's an awful lot of things we want to do, and it's only going to happen as and when we get the supporters and the money coming in. We will, of course, see you on Saturday, I'm sure, at the All Under One Banner rally in Edinburgh. I will be there with a camera and a microphone, so if you do see me, do come and say hello. I will not be here tomorrow night. I believe we have a guest host coming in, but we'll make that a surprise for you tomorrow. In the meantime, thank you very much to Chris for coming in and joining us.
Thanks again
and thank you for joining us at home. I've been Kenny McBride, and this has been Broadcasting Scotland, Scotland at 7. Good night.